so good to see you. And I'm going to introduce our guests to you all today. You know what? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to press record here in just a second. We are recording today's meetup, so I guess I'll save introductions here for just a minute. We're excited you're here. We are going to be distributing this meetup today through our partnership with Open Network, as well as links posted on ARC's website and our own podcast, the Team Church podcast. So make sure, if you find this conversation helpful today, make sure and share it with a friend. And we pray that it blesses you and blesses your church. All right. Well, welcome to Team Church today. I'm going to introduce my friends who have joined us for this conversation today. Let's see. First of all, I'm going to have Pastor Nicole Moore, our location pastor from our Tacoma location at Champion Center. Why don't you say hello to everybody? Nicole?
Hey everyone, so great to be with all of you. It's nice to see some familiar names in the chat and hopefully making some new friends today. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us. Super excited to share with you and hope we get to learn. Every time I do this, I learn from all of you. So please share your ideas because you help me be a better leader too.
Absolutely. Well said. I'm also going to welcome Pastor Jesse Rodriguez, who's our location pastor at Champion Center for our Lower Valley location, a new location to our church. So welcome to the call. Say what's up to everybody.
Hey, what's up, everybody? So glad to be on here. And like Pastor Nicole said, I echo that. I'm super excited to learn and be on this chat, and it's going to be great.
So good. And lastly, from our Champion Center team, Pastor Jody Cameron, no stranger to these calls the last couple of weeks. I've made you do several of these. Thanks for just making yourself available, making such an investment into leaders. She and her husband pastor our Bellevue location. Why don't you say what's up?
Yeah, hey, what's up? That's a really old one. It's good to be here and glad to be a part. Thanks for letting me join in the conversation. And like what's been said, it's not just about what we have to say. It's about starting a conversation for all of us to have and collaborate together. So if somebody asks a question in that Q&A box and you have an answer for it, please answer it, even if you're not a panelist here, because chances are we can learn from you too. So thanks for being here.
That's right. And then I have some other friends joining us from the greater Team Church tribe. Sara Nelson from the Well Church in Salt Lake City, Utah, under pastors Jason and Erica Parrish. She and her husband are campus pastors of the Sandy location. Why don't you say what's up to everybody, Sara?
Hey, I'm so excited to be on here with everybody. I'm so excited about this community. I am so thankful that we all get to be on here. We get to learn from one another, and we also get to just collaborate together. I think this is a great time to collaborate with what we can do to move forward.
And I love what God's doing at your church. It's special, and your online broadcast has been awesome every week, so we're excited to hear from you today. Also, Trevor Ritchie from Coast Life Church in Venice, Florida. You guys have probably got the best weather of the whole group going right now.
Yeah, we got pretty good weather outside. You guys challenged my math today. I had to go, wait, if the meeting's at 12 and I had to count over. So I'm excited to be here, but I'm also excited that I got it right. It's 3 o'clock over here, so it's getting a little later in the day, but I'm just excited to learn. What an opportunity this is to just connect Coast and like learn from what's working all around the country and all around the world. So I'm excited to be here and get this thing started. So,
Trevor, I think one of the things I loved meeting you earlier this year, you lead Next Gen Ministries at your church. So how do you say it? It's from diaper to graduation.
That's it, diapers to graduation. Outside of that, I got to push it to somebody else. That's a big age group for me. So.
But I also thought of you today with this conversation. You are on the platform a lot on the weekend and, communicate. And we're going to talk a lot about language today and how we're communicating to our churches. So love what God's doing at Coast Life Church. And I'm just going to dive right in here today. We have way too many questions to cover with our panelists. So we're going to get going and see where this takes us. Make sure you're asking questions in the Q&A section below or above, however you're watching this. Say hello to us in the chat, and I'm just going to pray this is going to be helpful. So first topic I wanted to get to today with all of us that I'm just really, really interested to hear from you all on, and that is on the idea of filling the gaps. Filling the gaps. And in this season, I think it's important for us to call this season what it is. We are truly leading in crisis. This is a generational defining season, I think, for many of us. We've not been here before. And every person on this call, you are a second chair leader. You report directly to your pastor in some way. And I would just love to know right now, what has it been looking like for you in your context to fill in the gaps for your pastors? No doubt this season comes with gaps, whether that be gaps in communication, whether that be gaps in structure. I feel like we've all had to reinvent so quickly. So I would just love to know, what has it looked like for you? How are you a gap filler right now for your pastor? Where are you finding some traction in that? Anyone can get going, by the way. We're just going to have an open conversation.
I think from a next-gen standpoint, sometimes, especially in a season like this, I noticed that priorities kind of shifted. Not so much priorities, but time. The amount of time that's taken to manage certain ministries, right? Like we were putting on full-on kid ministries and youth once a week, and that takes up a lot of my time, all of my time. But in this season, noticing that things go online, it sometimes it takes less time to maybe put on a youth ministry or to get all of the kids' content together. And I noticed that in this season, as somebody who serves in a ministry where time is kind of shifting, I have more time on my hands to step in and help. Like you said, like communicating from the main platform or stepping in and allowing myself to help in different areas. So I think it's in this season, it's important to realize like, where is my time being spent, and like reallocating that to maybe help the team. Because there's going to be, in a season like this where everything is online, there's going to be ministries that maybe don't seem as busy, but being on staff, it's our job to support each other as a team. And so reallocating my time and saying, okay, I have extra time in this place, in this space, in this time, in this day, and stepping in those gaps and helping out the team, I think is one way I've noticed that I needed to do that quickly. So.
Absolutely. I mean, under normal circumstances, you might play third base, but right now you got to, slide and play shortstop, or you got to, or you have to pitch or catch, and that's not your normal. No doubt that's kind of what crisis brings us. Anyone else just have a thought on how you're finding yourself most helpful in filling some gaps for your pastor?
I would like to say, I think, of course, in this situation, our gaps have been magnified, the gaps that we had before in our churches and even on our own leadership. But there's also gaps every single day and every single week that are developing based on this new season that we're in. And I think the gaps that I'm trying to fill is the gaps at my location and the people that I lead, because ultimately we're second chair leaders, and our pastors have entrusted us with people to shepherd and to lead them. And with the gaps that I'm seeing personally in myself is the communication the best? Are we having people connected? Are we getting people to make sure that they're noticed and loved on? So the best way that I'm filling a gap is knowing that moving the church forward is moving the people forward, and realizing that in this season, there is a disconnect to an extent. So really trying to wrap my brain around going, how can I get people connected, filling in that gap? Because when we fill that gap, I fill the gap of our location, but it fills the gap of our church and the heart of our pastor. So it's constantly going. Probably next week we're going to have another gap, but seeing those gaps and addressing them and level of severity as well too, but really trying to just love the people in the process.
And we're straight up old school right now, like phone trees and, phone calling lists. It's like 1985 again, where you got the phone tree broken down. I mean, isn't that kind of the reality that we're in right now of just reinventing what grassroots communication looks like? Pastor Nicole, I love your role is, I think, a bit unique, maybe from some on the call, from the standpoint that you kind of carry some central responsibilities and a location. Talk to us about how you're helping Pastor Kevin, keep his head on the main thing, and maybe some of the gaps you find yourself, filling in right now.
Sure. I would say that one of the things that really helped us from the get-go is that, and this is probably true for most of you, our senior leader, Pastor Kevin, got us together, and he just, week one, here's who's owning what. And the first thing is that all roles that we knew traditionally out the window. It's all hands on deck, everybody doing whatever they've got to do to actually, put people in strengths. And, for me, the blessing in doing that is that I hope that by owning some areas in Tacoma and with some of our team that oversee other areas, for example, I'm working with kids ministry right now. The gal our location pastor who oversees kids had a baby like the week before all this went down. And so all of a sudden now I'm back and hanging out with the kids team, which has been incredible. It's been great for me. It's been a blessing for me. But in the meantime, what it's done is it's helped, I feel like, taken a load off of our senior leader. Talk about filling gaps. If we're filling gaps, then he can actually position himself and pivot and focus on some things that are maybe outside of our location. I know he's spending a lot of time in calling other pastors and other leaders. And if we can own our gaps for the organization, I feel like we really give him permission. And one of the ways, in a practical way that I've done that is after that initial meeting, I got my marching orders. I knew what I needed to accomplish, met with teams. I'm still doing my part in leading with teams and meeting with teams while, so that he can feel like, okay, cool. She's got it. They've got it. We're covered. And then I just do a quick email update. Like on a weekly, I'm just like, okay, here's the update right now. He hasn't asked me for that, but I know it would be helpful to receive that. Here's where we're at. Here's where we're growing. If the team comes up with something amazing, I'll pass it on to them. Hey, just want you to see this amazing video that our team created on how to help our calling tree and how to use groups in Planning Center, and every little thing that I kind of send up the chain, if you will. And it's not all things. Like I spare him from the little stuff, but the detailed things that I feel like give him an inside scoop and will bring him peace of mind to know somebody's covering this. And okay, this is how they're doing it. That's how I've been working really hard to try to help support during this time. And then, checking in with other staff members, maybe being more mindful of those things than I maybe had been in the past, so that I can have updates. If he doesn't want to call 5 people, I know that if he calls me, I'll at least have my general understanding of how things are going to help him out.
That's so good. Which leads me to another thought I had getting ready for this call. And that was, as leaders, on our teams and our capacity, we're going to find problems, we're going to spot them, but I think we have a choice. We can either be problem announcers or problem solvers. We can either make our leaders aware of the problem, or we can come to them, with solutions. What is that looking like for you? I love the thought you just said, Nicole, about, maybe coaching other staff, something you weren't necessarily asked to do. So I'm not sure if anybody else would have maybe a practical example like that of just how it's looking to not just find a problem, but meet a need right now, in your role. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I would say we put a lot of emphasis on creativity being more artsy or, really good with social media. But I think creativity comes from being innovative. And so I think sometimes there's a practicality of, coaching, but sometimes there's a practicality of thinking 10 steps ahead. So if we've called everybody, 3,000 calls have gone out, what are we doing next to connect? Because a phone call is important and our Zoom calls are important and all of these things matter and we continue forward in them. But what can we do to connect on a personal level? Or what are we doing with our youth who have been, cooped up inside all day in order to connect? How can we engage them with some social distancing, but also get a face-to-face in? How can we be creative and innovative in this time? While everything's digital, we're still a relational being. And so we still are missing that face-to-face contact. So what can I do to be 10 steps ahead of maybe what, my pastors have thought of now, and then just going with it and then showing them like, hey, look at what we're doing. This is awesome. And then that gives other team members ideas and thoughts on what they can do in kids ministry or on, a Zoom call or whatever it may be.
So good, Sarah. So good. And Jesse, I noticed when we were prepping for this this meetup, you kind of shared the idea of no one should know my location better than me, right now. That I'm just going to own knowing people. Would you want to expand on that at all? Just where your head's at right now in terms of filling in the gaps with people?
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't even think it's something that I've thought about. And of course it's magnified itself in this season, but like, again, going back to being a second chair in my role, being of a location pastor, being under Champion Center as a whole with my senior leadership of Pastor Kevin and Pastor Sheila, they're the visionaries, they're navigating our church. But every single location, we have 5 physical locations and we have 1 online, so it'd be 6 total. It's one house, but different rooms. So every single room has a different color. Every single different room might have some shelves, a different size bed. So in that room, it has its own organic differences in it. And no one should know the room better than me. And so even in the season going, it might be a need for Pastor Jody and Pastor Nicole, where there's a common need for all of our locations, but we should be able to put a thumb on our location and going, this is the exact need right now of the people. And not just in this COVID season, but even after this going, it might be connection. It might not be engagement. It might be there's not people who want to serve and get a part of our team. So really realizing right now at my location, Pastor Kevin is my senior leader and he knows the direction of our church, but the person who knows our location the best should be me. If I don't, there's a problem in that. But really navigating that and being confident that he has entrusted me to lead the people and knowing the temperature, where we're at as a location and moving forward and having positive steps to make sure we're getting some wins on the table.
Yeah, really good. We have a question coming in that I think I'd like to get to here to kick off the Q&A party. And that's this idea of how are you as campus pastors, those who kind of lead in a more executive role, how are you empowering your staff or team or the leaders under you? I think this question was coming from the idea of our pastor, Pastor Kevin, kind of had this initial meeting where he sort of reset everything. Not every pastor may have done that. Every pastor is going to have different leadership style. So how are we working on empowering people, realizing we're leading in crisis? This thing's constantly changing, constantly moving. How are you empowering people around you right now? Anyone have any thoughts on that, Nicole?
Yeah, maybe I could just speak to that because I'm overseeing and helping out with the kids ministry right now. And by the way, just to get real naked and unafraid right here, as our pastor would want us to do, my sons are home from college and one of them brought home this cat. So if you see me frantic over here moving things, I'm not used to having a cat in the house. She's already like come in and her tail. Anyways, pray for me.
It's real life. This is real life.
This is real life. I'm like over here, like texting my daughter upstairs who's 17, like, how is she not on her phone? How is she not coming to get this cat by now? Anyways, that's real life stuff. So when it comes to like empowering the kids team though, I will be really honest. When we knew what our task was. We knew that we needed to figure out how we were going to engage. We had a couple things. We wanted to engage families. That means we wanted to connect with parents and help support parents. It meant that we wanted to find our way to reach our kids. How do we still teach our kids, love our kids, support our kids, and moms and dads all at the same time? And when we did that, what ended up happening is that I didn't know who was best for what. I knew that we wanted to create some videos. I knew that we had weekend services. I knew the logistics of the things we wanted to do. But what I didn't know always was who was going to rise and who was best fit. So we started out by just saying, okay, I'd like you to cover Easter. I'd like you to cover weekend services. I'd like you to cover our weekly, daily devotionals that we're going to do videos every single day for our kiddos. And I'd like you to do all the content development, the script writing, and our social media. Boom, go. After about 3 days, and I saw the very first video that was going on, after I got the first 3 days, then I ended up, I looked at one of the girls and I was like, I realized with the video, it wasn't us. It wasn't the quality, wasn't what we would want to produce, wasn't what we want to put out there. And so now I'm faced with this empowerment issue, right? Because we set out a standard and a vision, and then we empower people to come up with solutions. And it wasn't great. And so I shoulder tapped another team member and said, hey, I think that if we switched gears and you owned this and the other team member then moved more towards content, we would find our win. And what I'm most grateful for is nobody got offended. Nobody was like, well, I didn't get to, how come my video wasn't good enough? We were all on the same team, wanting to produce something really great for our kids. And so it wasn't without a lot of trial and error. I feel like we've kind of landed in our sweet spot. But one of the things I would say about empowerment is that you cannot just give it to them. There's a difference between delegating and dumping. And you can't just dump something on somebody. Delegation looks like you're involved in the process, not micromanaging, but here's the goal, here's the vision, we're all on the same page. Now go produce something and then bring it back to me. Like this time tomorrow, I want to see your results, and then I'll give you guidelines and some feedback on how we're doing. And that's really how we've worked as a team. And I will tell you, that model has produced some of the most creative experiences for our kids team. They are crushing it, and they are happy, and they are so excited. They're going and doing above and beyond what I would even ask or even think that they could do, simply because they feel like I'm 100% behind them. Go, 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 run with it, and then check in with me. And it's either going to be, tweak this, tweak that, but also being reasonable. Like we want excellence, but I understand that we're also limited. I mean, everybody wants our graphic design team and our media team to do everything for them right now. So we have to be realistic. Like, what can we do with an iPhone video, and where can we find some compromise? So I think when you're looking at empowerment, you've got to remember there's a difference between delegation and dumping and equipping somebody, setting them up for success with vision, and really letting them have those conversations, letting them explore, ask the questions, and then releasing them to do what it is that God has already put on the inside of them to do. And it's just been a wonderful experience.
That's well said. Well said. I'll ask this question came in. How are you all noticing your pastor's leadership style has changed in this season? Are they more in the weeds, less in the weeds? How are we adjusting maybe to their change? Because they probably are going through a very real, recalibration right now. It's awfully quiet in this Presbyterian.
I feel like our Pastor Kevin, he leads so well, even among crisis mode. So I don't know that his leadership style has changed necessarily. I can't say that I've experienced a positive change or a negative change in him. I see strength, and I think our team feels strength. I think what we're trying to do as a team is some of what you've already heard, but we're trying to take on some of those everyday tasks and really own them, so that when we do a check-in, like we had a check-in meeting today with some of our location pastors and some of our lead team, and we're able to check in with a positive thing and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're accomplishing, and these are some of the wins that we're hearing, instead of coming to the table and oh my gosh, I forgot to do that, and I'm so sorry, and let me get on that now. We're actually able to say, this is going well, or this is where I'm stuck. And then he's able to give feedback and not necessarily get stuck in the weeds, although he wants to have access to the weeds, right? So I think as a support team, what we can do is give our leaders access to the minutia of it all, so that they can kind of come and go as they please in it, but they don't feel like they have to have the machete and be the one that's getting the pathway through the weeds. That's us, that we're taking ownership in, but then they can kind of come in and out when they can, or when they want to see the details, but they don't feel like they're owning the details.
Yep. Let me ask you guys this. A version of this question came in. What are you finding right now that you're starting or doing that you actually hope you'll maintain once we're out of this crisis season? I mean, has this brought out some new leadership style or new things in your team that you're actually hoping, man, I hope this can just become a new normal for us? Trevor?
Yeah, I'd say just on a personal level, I feel like so often we try to categorize where we place things, it's God, and then it's your family, and then ministry. And you hear this so often where people are like, what are you spending your time with? And make sure you're prioritizing certain things. And I just think this season is really highlighting that God never intended us to separate any of those things, but he's actually called us to do all of them at the same time. And when you are stuck in a house with 3 children under 5, you will learn to be a dad, a leader, a Christian, because you will be reading your Bible with one foot out, so you can try to get your kid away so you can finish that verse that you're in. So, I mean, it's really teaching me that, when we step back out of this season, I want to be a person who can be flexible in the season or even in the situation, but be 100% present with what's in front of me. So if it is that I'm reading my Bible, then I need to go in that quiet space in my house, which it's very hard to find one, but I tend to find it in the darkest corner of my home. Or if my child is in front of me, well, then it's time to be a dad. And I think that this is just a season that's highlighted that there were times when I was on campus that I could have had my daughters with me. And I'm seeing that now. Like, I could have had one of them with me when I was leading a huddle and standing next, maybe not all three, but I could have been doing ministry better as a father with them. And so when we step back out of this season, I just want my family and all of this to be a thing that I'm doing at the same time, and not trying to always be like, all right, how much time did I spend on this? How much time did I spend on that? Rather, just organically allowing them to flow together and lead in that capacity. Because in the end, I'm passing that to my daughters. I'm saying, this is how you lead with a family and a church, and this is how you do the things of God. And they're intended to be done all at the same time, but giving 100% of that attention to whatever you're focusing on in that moment. So it's about being present, I think, is what I'm learning, being present. So like right now, my children, they're somewhere in my house, and my wife, she's battling them off so they don't come in the office and hit the computer. That's what it is. They're team players over here.
we all in the same boat. I hear you. I hear like dance party going on downstairs. I don't know what's going on, but I'm sure it's something. I echo that, by the way. I'm loving the evening routine right now. We've been doing game nights almost every night. Like, when was the last season we ever did game nights? Like, more than once a month, or even that, yeah, I totally agree. I'm falling in love all over again with even some of those small things.
Can I just share this? I saw this post a while ago, and some of you may have already seen it, but just talking about the things that come out of crisis, and I think if we focus on the crisis and the problems, then we're just going to get stuck in the mud of the problem. Versus if we start focusing on solutions and the post problem, if we get focused on what could happen or the new things that could come out of this. The last recession, between 2008 and 2010, Uber was founded, Airbnb was founded, Slack was founded, Pinterest, WhatsApp, Inc., Square, Venmo, all of those, and probably more, but those are the ones that I'm the most familiar with. All of those were founded within that time frame of 2 to 3 years. And so I'm excited to see what comes out of this season. Yes, it's hard. Just because some cool stuff is going to happen over the next decade because of this season doesn't make this any easier. But I think if we can get ourselves out of the half is glass empty mode and think about the solutions to problems and the possibilities and the innovations that can come from limitation, and just see what could actually happen, not only in our church for the church, but also in our people who are a part of our church in the community, that as we care for them, we're going to help them stay out of the glass is half empty. We're going to help them see the vision, and maybe they'll have a God-inspired idea through this hard season, and a business will be started, or a company will be launched, or a great idea will be founded, because we're doing our job as the church to keep people inspired and keep people full of hope and faith. And you never know what that does to people, to keep their hearts open and their minds open, so that a seed can be planted for a great idea, for a solution for this season, that will actually outlast this season and create some really amazing things in the aftermath.
Yeah.
Not all collateral damage has to be damage. I think some, collateral damage could actually be positive. So we have to think of another word for damage, but collateral goodness.
Collateral goodness. It's coined. It's yours. There it is. Yeah, very, very well said. And I think leading people back to that, reminding people of that reality, because I think it's easy to forget that when you're Trevor and you're the Bible and the kids and the this and the, it's really easy to forget about that fact, that there's awesome things happening right now. Let's shift the conversation now. I think the thing I was most excited to talk to you all about today was language. And we have a lot of different personalities on this call and a lot of different contexts. So I'd just love to hear from everybody on language. Language matters in crisis. Language always matters in leadership, but it really matters right now. We are framing this season for our churches and for people. And so got a couple of points here we want to talk about on how we're leading the language in our churches and with our staff and teams. But I think one of the most, and this might sound funny to some, but I think one of the most important things we could talk about, first of all, is the role that even things like grief play in times like this. I mean, when you're in crisis, it's important that we're not just all hype. We need to acknowledge the reality of what's going on. And one of the realities is there is a grieving going on, whether people have that language or not. And I'm going to throw to Pastor Nicole for a second, because you've been helpful to my wife and I in different seasons on this, been helpful to our own staff recently. Talk to us about this thought on how people are actually experiencing grief right now, whether they even realize it or not.
Sure. When we hit the crises, it was back in 2007, 2008 with the everything, the market crashing. At that time, my husband was managing a hedge fund in the stock market, and we lost everything. We lost our home, we lost jobs. We had 3 kids at the time. And I remember that the general public felt it, but not everybody felt it, so it's different now because we're kind of all feeling it. It might look different how we're feeling it, but we're all experiencing it at the very same time. There's some kind of cost happening to us. And what ended up happening during that season is that I'm a fixer. So each one of our personalities is going to respond to this scenario differently. You're going to have your people that are just going to like completely withdraw, and the world is coming to an end, and they're the ones who bought all the toilet paper at Costco. Like the rest of us are like, chill out. We're going to be fine, but they bought all the toilet paper and they bought all the beans off the shelf. And if everyone would just maintain their chill and their cool, we're going to make it through together. Well, then you have other personalities that are like, you know what? Full speed ahead. We're not going to back down. This isn't going to impact us at all. We're still going to do this, and we're still going to do that. And you kind of have everything else in between. And for me personally, that looked like I'm a fixer. I'm an Enneagram 1. And so I heard recently that to call ourselves the improvers, not the perfectionists. I'm like, improver. That's who I am. I'm an improver. Well, I just went ahead and just started fixing things. Like, trauma was coming, things were happening, no income. I'm just going to still, fix it for my kids. I'm going to fix it for my husband. And I immediately threw myself back into work. And then I found myself one day literally breaking down emotionally. And I'm not like, I'll cry at a sappy movie, but I'm not a highly emotional female where I get really emotional easily. So when the tears were coming in the middle of my workday, at that time I was a classroom teacher, I knew something was really wrong with me. And I found myself in a counselor's office, and she helped me see that, Nicole, even if you're not currently in the moment, you're experiencing the grief of loss. And I'm like, no one died. No one died. So how could I be grieving? And I think that's where we need to be careful, is that, like Pastor Brandon said, that people are in some cycle of grief. And I'll just tell you, the cycle is first part is denial and isolation. The second is anger. After that, it's bargaining. After that, it's depression. And then finally, we find our way into acceptance. Now, it doesn't always go in some neat linear little order like that either. And you'll find that at different times we'll be at different points of the spectrum. And I know for me, last week it hit. I had a day where I was just like, oh my gosh, I had nothing to give, no motivation. I worked out. I mean, I did everything I could. I'm listening to The Blessing. I'm like, if Carrie Jo can't get me there, I'm in really big trouble. Well, I was in really big trouble because even The Blessing wasn't getting me there during the day, And I feel like some ways I went through that experience so that I could have more empathy for the people that I'm serving right now. I don't know if they're going to just charge full steam ahead and be a fixer, or I don't know if they're going to be the one who's over in the corner just hiding out and fearful and afraid and like, are we going to make it? How can we make it? Before this meeting, I got an email thread on all the prayers, and I just learned that somebody who's been in business for 18 years, a mechanic in our church that I've gone to many times, is just asking for prayer because he's got to close down his shop. My heart immediately just aches for that. And I think about what will this mean for their family? And so I think in part of our language, there has to be some sensitivity. I think there is time for us, and we should be the ones who are the carriers of faith. I love what Pastor Kevin's preaching right now out of Mind Monsters, and faith is the answer. And we've got to focus on what's positive. We got to imagine God doing something good right now. Those are really important words for us to say. At the same time, we also have to be patient enough and have enough compassion to listen and hear people who are hurting right now before we just jump quick to the this is this and the this is this. Like, let's acknowledge that we're in a place that's tough, and it's okay to have days. days. I didn't feel how I felt last week on Thursday. I didn't feel that same way on Friday. On Friday, I was like, yes, I'm back. Let's go. And we need to be aware that those cycles and those ebbs and flows of grief are going to come at every single one of us. And that also means it's true for the people that we're serving. So I think it's just language about being aware of the spectrum of how humanity is going to embrace this season. And it's just going to look different for all of us.
Yep. Yesterday, we had just got done recording for the Team Church podcast, which is out today with Pastor Kevin, and our governor had just made the announcement that our schools were going to be out, for the rest of the school year here in the state of Washington, and then my mom used the wrong family group text to text us all her thoughts on it. She included the one with my daughter, who we hadn't had a chance yet to tell she wasn't going back to school, and all of a sudden she sees on her iPad, and we get a text from her in all caps, I'm not going back to school, which would not be good news. She would like going to school. And so we all just kind of had to take a minute and realize this ain't going anywhere right now. It's beginning of April. We've got 2 months now of this reality, whatever's happening downstairs right now, and all that. And I think I'm so glad you brought this up, that it's important to acknowledge where we're at and not move people too quickly past absorbing it, because it has very real implications for all of us, financially, relationally. I'll say this maybe, and I'd be interested to hear what y'all would say about this, just talking about language. We were on a lead pastor's call a few days ago, and someone said this line, and it has been sticking with me. If you think about it, everyone that's quarantined or in a shelter-in-place scenario right now, they are locked up with their demons. If there's negative stuff in their world, think about it. People that are in abusive relationships are now quarantined with that relationship. People that struggle with alcohol are locked up with their alcohol in their house. Pornography addictions. I mean, you could say that about any number of things. A shelter in place would not be a welcome event for many people, tragically. And we have to speak to that with people, because those are the people that are right now tuning in, on the weekends and even maybe a part of our teams. So how are you all caring for people, caring for team members? You have team members that may be a little bit displaced, maybe a greeter doesn't look the same right now. Maybe they're struggling with things. What is pastoral care? I know we've talked about kind of the phone tree idea already, but is there anything else you're practically doing just to kind of care and speak the language of care to people? Sarah, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, so I love what Nicole was saying, and I think that a great approach is remembering that everyone processes differently and everyone's need is different. So I think that to be a strong leader, you have to be a good listener. And I think when we're a good listener, then we can language around that need. And so I think instead of having one language, you assess the moment with that person, and then you language around what that person needs. And when we hear what they need, there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy, you're sitting with that person in their need. It doesn't mean you're getting into their need and taking their need on yourself. You're still leading them in that moment. But when you're empathizing with them, you're hearing what their need is, and then you can assess what language needs to be brought into the conversation. So I think for us at the Well, it's just, we're always on right now. We're in a season where we are available for the needs of those who call the Well home. And so you go into it knowing that you have the patience, you have the time, because you know that you're going to need to step back, listen, assess what that person's saying, and then bring language into the conversation that's actually going to pull them through.
Very well said. Very well said. Let me ask you all this before we just kind of get to the assortment of questions that are coming in. How are you all handling the pace right now? Because we are in, I feel like as leaders, we've moved from being like doctors, like outpatient kind of flow, to like triage, ER. The pace, I don't know about you guys, pace has just been crazy. It's been way busier. even though I'm sitting in this same spot in my attic, all the time right now, it's like I'm busier than ever, it feels like. So how are you all handling the pace, and what would be some practical thoughts for managing a quick kind of emergency room triage, sort of pace right now in crisis leadership?
Love that, what Nicole was saying, just about being vulnerable about last Thursday. I feel like we've all been there. And so like handling the pace, I think it's putting your mask on first. Like you're on the airplane, but you can't help nobody else if you're not helping yourself first. So I think to handle the schedule, like one, you just have to be flexible. Flexible has to literally be in the center of your day. You have to understand that like if you're in a home with children, they're going to mess up your schedule when they used to not mess up your schedule. Like when you had a meeting set and then all of a sudden something happened and now you're on a phone call, or you need to run out and grab something and now you're home, you got to wash your hands. Like there's things that are unexpected in this season. And I think assessing your emotional well-being, I had a leader the other day, we were on a call and she was only typing and she wasn't talking. And I just checked in with her really quick and I was like, hey, everything good? She's like, yeah, I'm just really emotional right now. And if I talk, like I'm going to cry. But what I thought was important, and I highlighted it later, is that she had the emotional intelligence to know that in that moment, like talking, like typing was the best thing for her to handle the situation she was walking through. And I think if all of us have the emotional intelligence to make sure that our mask is on first, that we're taking care of ourselves first, and we're setting a schedule for the day, understanding that it may change, being flexible with that, but then also understanding that everybody else may not have that vision. So when you're in a meeting and all of a sudden, or you're on a call and somebody seems to be getting a little emotional, we were on one of our Zoom group chat or group calls, and I'm literally sitting there with my wife. We're in the same camera, and I'm like, she's sitting here, and nobody can see my finger, and I'm like pointing at couples in our group. You can see them wearing what they were walking through. And it's being emotionally aware of yourself, but it's also being emotionally aware of other people. Like, where are they at in that moment? And then reaching out. The phone call is great when it's one phone call after another, but then being aware of like, wait a second, that's not normally how they act. And so that's something that I need to add to my schedule today, that it wasn't in my schedule, but I need to check in on this person. And then the last thing is like just allowing God to like put people on your heart. Like you think of somebody in that moment, it's probably because they're walking through something. And so, yeah, your schedule may be about to change for the next 30 minutes because you might need to jump on a call because somebody needs you in this moment. I love how you said we're going back to old school church. Like you checking on your neighbor. And then you're equipping people to say, now I need you to check on somebody. Like here's the resource that I gave you, whether it's a Google Doc to fill out for the church, or we call them together groups to join in on. Like, how are you equipping the next person to say, wait a second, who am I passing this to? Who are they checking on? Because the reality is like our lead pastors can't check on all thousands and thousands of people. And so how good are we getting at equipping down the line and saying, now see how I checked on you? Like, I need you to make sure that you're being emotionally aware of not only yourself in the moment, but other people around you, that you're caring for people in this season. So.
Great thoughts. Jesse?
I would even like to add, I like what Trevor said earlier about like the mask, like taking care of yourself, and disruption has happened in my routine. I'm like routine through and through and everything. But what the great thing about it, I have a background of an exercise science degree. I used to be like a trainer for college athletes. And anyone that does any sort of training, if you get stuck in a routine, your strength will stay at that place. And I believe that we really got to take this season and not look at it as a glass half empty, but half full, and going, I think God is trying to shake us up in our own personal lives. Again, taking care of us, but taking us to another level that will allow us to take our teams and our church to another level. And sometimes you need a disruption, or if you're consistently doing the same exercise, the same amount of resistance, the same amount of reps, eventually you will halt your progression and you have to change it up just a bit, a higher intensity, a different sort of rep range in order to increase your strength. I love the fact that disruption has allowed a lot of us who were in a rut of doing, okay, I'm doing bench, squat, cleans consistently over and over. And God's saying, maybe you need to throw some curls in there. Maybe you need to throw some tricep push-ups down. Like I know I'm talking about a situation in weight training, but I'm thinking in our lives, as some of us, it's a consistent checking in on people, but God's saying, have you checked in on you? And when you check in on you, you can help other people. So there's a lot of things where looking at this season going, there's disruption, but this disruption can be a beautiful thing that it could take us higher, be better leaders, better spouses, overall in every single angle of our life. And that's what I love. And even being a routine guy, disruption has been very beneficial.
That's really, really good. I wanted to share something really fast that Pastor Kevin shared on a lead pastor call yesterday. We actually put it out on the Team Church podcast today. If you kind of want to listen to the whole thing, that Pastor Kevin and Sheila were brilliant on there, talking about maintaining confidence in crisis. But as you're talking about pace, some of these thoughts come up. I just offer these to everybody today for us to consider and maybe even share that podcast with your pastor. First thing he said was this: extend your timeline. Extend your timeline. In other words, like talking about pace, he pushed back on the idea of it's not our job to think we're going to be out of this tomorrow. You know, we're going to be done with this online thing tomorrow. That's actually can erode your confidence. Rather than saying this is our reality, and for as long as it's here, we're going to embrace this season and all that this season wants to do in us. In other words, rather than just holding your breath and waiting for tomorrow, you know, let's just embrace the new realities of our pace and all that. He also said this. He said, talk about the wins of the season. Make sure you're celebrating with your teams. And I'm going to ask you guys a question about that in a second. He talked about restructuring your schedule. So back to Jesse and Trevor were just commenting on here a second ago that all of us have to reinvent our schedule right now. It's going to look different. It should look different. Maybe it would almost be irresponsible right now if it doesn't look different. And he was saying on that call, if you've got away from some things recently, why don't you get back to them right now? Use this as the reset. If you're not reading your Bible like you would like to, you have a perfect shot right now to rework your schedule. He talked about improving your use of technology. Obviously, you're on here today, so we're doing that. We couldn't meet in person, so we're meeting like this. Just make this a season that we're not only improving our use of technology today, but also from today on, and that this is going to be a new normal for us. And then he talked about communicating more and not less, so that people just need to hear your voice right now. They need to hear from you a lot. They got a lot of time. They got a lot of time to focus on something. It might as well be on the things that matter and the things that are important. Before we get to the rest of our questions that have come in, I wanted to ask you guys, how are you celebrating with your teams right now? How are you celebrating the wins? And not hype, not artificial hype, just celebrating the really good things that God is doing, finding them, celebrating them. What's that looking like for you all with your teams? Sarah.
Yeah, so every Sunday before our live service or live stream online, we do a big team rally. And in that team rally, before we even get started, we go through like, hey guys, this is how many people have said yes online. This is how many people are viewing what Pastor Jason is communicating. These are how many people that have recommitted their life. These are how many people that are connecting. And then just a really big thank you to what they're doing, because we have an exceptional team they're just rising up to the occasion, and they want to be a part of where this is going and what we're doing. And so just commending them on that and cheering them on in that.
I love it. Anyone else have any thoughts on celebrating wins?
I know for us, we've had to redefine wins in some ways, so like we've changed some of the ways we measure our metrics right now. We've changed, how we're engaging with people. So, one of the biggest gaps for us was that we realized overall we were really caring for people in person, like on Sundays and on Wednesdays or in life groups, but we weren't necessarily pushing ourselves as location leaders or team leads to really care for people outside of those settings. Now, obviously that's a very overarching. I'm sure we have some really good people at all of our locations that were doing an outstanding job. But overall, we've just realized that we could do a better job caring for people. And so that's where the phone trees came in. And so we're celebrating the wins of the phone trees. So those didn't exist 3 weeks ago. We're calling them family trees and connect trees at some of our locations, but those didn't even exist. And that's now something that we're celebrating, right? We're celebrating how many devices are logged into any of our meetings. We weren't necessarily counting those before, right? We're also counting faces in the screen that we can see, because some devices represent more than one person. We're celebrating emails that are coming in about the online groups that we're having. So some of the things that didn't even exist 3 weeks ago, we've just had to change what a win even looks like now. And I think part of that is just adjusting to a new normal. And it might be obvious for some people, but other people, I think, could be disappointed because they're not counting the same things. And so if you're trying to compare apples to apples, then it looks really different right now. And some people, it looks better than it did before. And some people, it could look worse than it looks before. And so we've just been challenging ourselves. I've been challenging myself to not try to compare one season to another, but just really celebrate the things that we can celebrate right now, and look forward to maybe new things that we'll be celebrating next week that we didn't even know exist yet. So just a couple of practical examples.
Yeah, and I think we just have to get used to an ever-moving target here right now in this season. Trevor, did something you wanted to say?
Yeah, we actually got the opportunity 2 weeks ago to launch our online campus. It's been something that's been in the works. And this season pushed us. It was like, hey, guess what? You're launching this. And so everything in this season now, one, is new for a lot of us, but for us, even the online location is new. And so getting the first 30 people to actually click on that and not watch on, over here on YouTube or Facebook, and starting to see people week by week funnel in service by service, and that they have the opportunity to fill out that digital connect card or ask for prayer. Every single, you get it. So in this season, I feel like we've been lined up where everything is new. And so there's a place to celebrate. Hey, we got our first prayer request through our online platform. Like you can celebrate the small in a season where everything is new, because you're moving church forward. So we'll step back out of this season and church is not going to look the same. But now we have an online location that would have probably taken us 8 months, 9 months to get what we've gotten in 3 weeks. Why? Because all of our resources and everything is focused on pushing this forward. And so we're going to look back and say, man, we have a really effective online service now, an online location, and we do church really well on the weekend. And so I just feel like we're able to reach more people. Like we had somebody from Africa. We celebrated that. We were like, come on, he's watching from Africa right now. Like that's a party. Where I'm from, that's a party. So like it's finding the wins in the new, in the changing, and saying, you want to know what? If this is moving church forward, then people need to know about it, and we're celebrating it. And it may not look the same. It may not be that we reached an attendance record or something like that, but you want to know what? It's still worth celebrating, because God is reaching people through all of these new innovative things that each church is doing. And so it's just amazing to be a part of it.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, we're going to play lightning round here. We have a couple minutes left, and we have a few questions that have come in. So we're going to do short, sweet answers and just see how many we can get through here in the last couple of minutes that we have. Stephanie Blanton from Freedom House Church wrote this one in on the Q&A. How is everyone keeping their teams in a healthy place, especially those who are struggling to adapt to the new normal? We all know that not everyone's a fan of change. So how are we helping teams maybe keep up to pace and also handle kind of the increased pace of our new normal? Anyone have a thought on that?
Well, we're using a variety of different ways. I think it also comes down to some of the personality of our leaders. We've got some staff members that are highly social. Like they are just like, I gotta be around people. They're doing Zoom calls pretty frequently with our whole group. Like our gal who runs our connections, Robin McCoy, she is meeting with everybody who's on connections team. I think they meet on Sunday nights. Then she meets again with just our, the team leads and the leaders. we have in our kids area, Crystal Theo oversees our preschool and our nursery teams, and they've had Group Me already, which is an app you can download and everyone can get on the same group. She's been using Group Me to just, encourage her team. And the one thing that really impresses me about what she's done is she's like, I realized that in the season, I'm giving a lot out and I couldn't manage the Group Me app like I wanted to. So she's actually delegated out to her team members. Hey, would you, her team members from week 1 of preschool and nursery, hey, would you own this week or today or this many days out of the week? Would you own a memory verse? Would you own an encouraging word or an encouraging thought? And she is actually equipping and teaching in turn her team to help care for the teams, not just it all being on her. And we're seeing a lot more of that than ever before. We talk about the calling tree. The calling tree is really just a way for us to work through our leaders. So we're asking leaders to lead. We're leading through our leaders and encouraging them to be the ones who are having the phone calls and making the conversations and reporting back to us things that we need to know. But it's really more of a grassroots type effort in that way, where it's like, hey, it's not necessarily segregated, but definitely much unique to where those people are that you would normally connect with. Like I've thought of a few outliers, there's an older couple at Tacoma that I see, they wait for me after the huddle every single Sunday. I called them on the phone last week. I learned all about how, what it was like in World War II versus what it's like today. And they shared with me about, the moral decline of America is the reason why we're in the situation that we're in. And I'm just listening to them and loving on them, excited to see them again. And so I think there's a lot of flexing and flowing, but the ultimate thing is just making contact. How are you making contact? It can be as simple as a FaceTime call. It doesn't have to be as sophisticated as Zoom. A phone call is enough in some instances. Some people don't even like phone calls, by the way. They prefer text messages. So with our family calling tree, there's a script that we've passed and we've shared with our teams, like, hey, you can actually text this. You can call. We're trying to do our best to kind of equip people to just do what they can to be the ones to just make that connection.
So good. So good. We had a question come in from Austin, and I saw this question a couple times leading into this. So love if any of you have wisdom on this one. What are some steps we can take toward launching a new campus in the midst of the situation? I'm imagining the new campus was already in the works. So the situation being someone, a church had a plan, maybe they're launching in the fall. I think one person on here said their church is launching a campus in the fall. How do we even think about that right now and plan for that when things are still so fluid? That's a biggie. Anyone have any thoughts on that one?
Well, we met yesterday with some of our location pastors and, just talking about what we were doing with our day and how we were, considering our specific locations. And then we started talking about a leadership development thing that we're going to start actually in March before the whole COVID thing blew up on us, right? And so it's just kind of been on hold. And what we talked about the most, not the most, but just a lot yesterday was, are we going to push pause on leadership development right now just because we're in quarantine? Or can we be creative and actually develop leaders through this season, maybe in a different way than we expected, but where we can get to, July or August or September or whenever it is, we can get back together again physically. And we can actually say we have more leaders than we had going into the COVID crisis because we didn't push pause on leadership development. And so we don't have all the answers figured out. We didn't come up with the solution yesterday. We just literally started talking about it and what it could look like. And we have a meeting next week to finish or continue the conversation. But I think if there was a campus or a location that was in the works, I would just say be open-handed about it in terms of timeline. Extend the deadline maybe if you need to and not be upset about it, but really know that God is in it somehow. And then also on the other hand, what can we do? What can you do to develop leaders through this season? Is it a Zoom call? Is it a webinar? Is it, small groups? Or is it, with your location pastor that is going to launch with that location? Can they start doing group calls or group texts or Facebook group? I mean, I don't know what it could look like in your context, but we're challenging ourselves at Champion Center to not push pause on leadership development just because it looks different than we were expecting. And what can it look like? We don't have that answer today, but we are talking about it because we want to be stronger on the other side of this and not the same and definitely not weaker than we were going into it.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that too? Because when we were getting ready to launch our DuPont location, I would say 90% of what we did was what we were doing before there ever became a soft launch or an actual opening. There's so much you can be doing right now and continuing to do. And I love what Jody said about being open-handed about the timeline. That to me is the one thing that has to shift in all this. But the rest of it, keep going, believing God for what it is that he's put in your heart to do. Keep rallying people, keep coming together, keep building teams, keep identifying leaders. In fact, this might be a season where people come to you and say, hey, I want to step up and lead now. I feel like God's moving me in this direction. You just don't know what he could do in the middle of a crisis like that. But I would just say, unless you got some like legitimate setback that's coming, like, and granted, there will be financial things that all of us are going to have to face. But I would say just because there's maybe a setback financially, or even if the timeline, doesn't mean it's a no forever. It might be no for now in terms of the launch, but it might not be a no forever. So keep going.
Yeah, and there's no miracle grow for leaders. Leaders don't grow overnight, so we might as well be working on it right now. And I know we're supposed to be giving short answers, but I want to actually add something in here really fast, just in the mindset of looking out ahead. The thing that's on my mind is we have a conference coming up in August, and my pastor hasn't asked about it yet. Like, we've not had the conversation, but we know it's coming. Like, at some point, we're going to have to sit down and figure out, what do we do? And that time is not today, but here's what I'm going to offer. And I'm not going to try to solve a real issue on a Zoom call here like this. But in my mind, I figure I need to offer him 3 options. And it's my job I need to offer him a live option, a hybrid option, and an online option. And I need to research those things. I don't know what those look like. But by the time he asks, I feel like it's my job to have my head around it. So I'm trying to anticipate, like, maybe that conversation is 3 weeks out, or two, I don't know. But it's my job in the next couple of weeks to get ready so that when he sits down, I'm actually educated, informed. So maybe just be thinking about anticipatory leadership, that conversation is coming up at some point. Maybe options, researched options would help somebody. I'm going to get to maybe one more question here. Someone asked, how are you producing high quality content, that you're producing when you don't have access to maybe the best equipment, or even the stay-at-home laws, have changed some things? How are we? I know we're talking about getting scrappy with iPhones. I mean, maybe we can just set some people free. That it's not a lot fancier than that right now. But how are we approaching quality right now in this season? Would anyone have a thought on that?
Well, I'll just say this. I was answering that question, actually typing it. I think technical things needs to be answered by somebody else, but the state of Washington did not list churches as essential originally. And so our pastor and a few of our Team Church tribe churches that are in the state of Washington got together, and we just started appealing to local pastors, and we got a petition signed. I think the last time I heard, a couple weeks ago, we had over 200 pastors, just pastors, not like people from churches, but pastors of different churches that signed a petition. And we just got in the ear of any of our local government who would listen, mayors, senators, governors, the governor's office, and we just kept calling until we got the answer that we wanted. And churches are actually a part of the essential workers now, so we can go to our buildings when we need to get to the equipment that we need to get to. And we also took some equipment home to like Pastor Kevin. They have, lights and hold like stands for their iPhones and iPads so that they can actually have like an in-house studio for when they need it. But they're still using iPhones and iPads for most of the things that they're recording for themselves, Pastor Kevin and Pastor Sheila. But churches, they're still not listed separately, but we got word from the governor's office of where the churches are kind of included in, even though it doesn't say church or faith-based. But we basically got the go-ahead that we can be at our location to do what we need to do.
I think Jody, you said something to me so powerful a couple of weeks ago, just when we were talking about what to even do with meetups and stuff. And you said, I'd rather be published than polished right now. And not that we're talking about a major drop in excellence. I think we can still be excellent. But that really set me free of just, I'm not going to worry about all the polish. I mean, our podcast we put out today for Team Church is a recorded Zoom call. We would never do that normally. There's some internet glitches on there and there's all of it, but we wanted to get word out. We wanted to be helpful, and we did it as excellently as we could. But we're also a little scrappy right now, and I think we're okay with it. It's crisis leadership. Hey, I want to thank you guys for your time today, and thank you guys for speaking wisdom and life into some leaders. Before we go, maybe a couple of you can answer this. My last question for you is going to be this: how are you? What do you want to believe God for? How am I wanting to ask this? How do you want to see our churches look different after this crisis when we emerge from this stronger, better? Just what's on your heart for how our churches, how our teams emerge from this season that we find ourselves in right now? Anyone have a thought on that as we close?
I would say appreciation would be key. I think that in this season, I think for those that you would call high-level volunteers who are consistently serving, giving every single week, the reality is at times they're kind of, you would use the word burnt out, or they're kind of like, oh, I got to go to church. That they would have a fonder appreciation going, man, the church is so excellent. I took it for granted. Those who would attend every other weekend, now that they don't have something to attend a physical location, they'd go, man, I didn't take advantage of what we had available. And for those who don't know Jesus at all, that they would have an appreciation. There's a local church that gives them a place to encounter a real Savior. So appreciation would be the hope in my thought for our church, that people would appreciate what we have to offer at local churches all around the world.
Well said.
Mine would be ownership. I hope that people who have been attending and maybe been more of a consumer Christian, would actually then realize that, wow, there's this gratitude that's welled up on the inside of them for the effort that our churches have gone through, like launching an online campus in 2 weeks. I would hope that gratitude starts to rise. And because of that, they actually see themselves as a very integral part of ministry and not just see it as a staff person's job or the leaders the volunteers that they always see. I hope that people have this recognition on the inside of them. Like, I want to give back. I want to now thank. I want to now be a part. Like, this is so much bigger than me. And that there's something that God has on the inside of me to contribute to make our church community better. And I want to give that. That's my hope.
Yeah, I would say having the presence in the small. I think that sometimes we get focused on these big wins and the big numbers and the big, everything is in the big. And right now I'm realizing that I miss the small. Like, I miss the high fives and the hugs, and I miss the hellos and things that you kind of take for granted when you're moving through the hustle and bustle of the Sunday. Like, just being present in the small, like every prayer card that comes in, that's somebody's heart. And I feel like when you get a stack of them, you're like, oh, we got a good amount this week. And it's like celebrating the large amount. But man, like, now seeing that online campus happen and you get that first one, it's reminding me that, like, being present in the small, in every intricate detail of what's happening in church, like, you get to see people, you get to see people's hearts, and recognizing that, yeah, it may be thousands of people showing up on campus, but it may be somebody's first day. So being present on that hello, that high five, that could be the day that changes their life. So I just hope that I stay present after this, and I don't get lost in the hustle and bustle that I feel like we were getting caught up in. So
major recalibration happening there. I love it. Well, I want to say thank you to my guests today. Thanks so much for adding so much gold into this conversation today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And just know we're running alongside you. We're praying for you. We're believing for God's favor, God's protection, God's provision to be on your lives, on your families, on your churches. So thanks for joining us today. God bless. We'll hopefully be talking to you soon. We love you, Team Church. Be blessed.